Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Derek Coffey and I'm the founder of FWP. And if you believe the headlines of needing $1 million to retire, then you probably feel like you're never going to get there. Well, I'm here to tell you that for the majority of you, $1 million just isn't necessary. For most of you, having less than $1 million is still going to give you a very comfortable retirement. With proper planning, you could retire on Social Security alone, but even if you only have 100,000, 200,000, maybe a half a million dollars, you would be surprised at the type of retirement that you can have. Of course, there are outliers, and it's all based on your individual circumstances, but for the majority of middle America, you do not need to have a seven-figure account just for you to call it quits. In this video, I'm going to show you why, and we're going to work through the numbers and prove to you why having that $1 million just isn't necessary. Stay tuned. The thing that always confused me about this $1 million myth is, where did it even start? Who came up with it? Well, I did a little bit of digging and found out that in the 90s, workers were becoming skeptical of how well Social Security would secure their retirement. As opposed to relying on Social Security, they started looking for other ways to save. Around this same time, the 401k was exploding in popularity. Companies were offering the 401k. They were offering incentives for their employees to participate. And the 401k ultimately became the scapegoat for companies not to offer pensions anymore. Also, in the 90s, the Trinity study was published. The Trinity study is what established the 4% rule. And the premise of that rule is that you can take the beginning account balance that you retire with, withdraw 4% of it in year one, adjust it for inflation every year after that, and you have an over 90% chance of not running out of money over a 30-year retirement. Now, when you take that 40,000 and add it to your Social Security income, you're going to have a very nice retirement. There's no question about that. But the problem that I have with that $1 million standard is that that was set in the 90s. We're now 30 years beyond that, and that $1 million is now $2 million just to keep the same purchasing power. These are the numbers that you see in the media all the time. It's all the headlines that pop up on Yahoo or any finance website. And you're bombarded with these things to scare you into continue working. Fortunately for you, retirement is not all about savings. It's mostly about your cash flow. Of course, having more money saved makes your retirement more enjoyable. It allows you to do more things. But having $1 million just isn't necessary. The easiest way to prove it to you is by the numbers. So what we're going to do is we're going to work through an example of a married couple who are receiving $2,000 a month in Social Security, and I'm going to show you why that $1 million is simply a myth. So to make my case as to why you don't need $1 million saved, we have to go through the numbers. Now, for me and the people that I work with, our baseline of retirement expenses is $5,000 a month. This isn't an arbitrary number. I did actually put thought into it, but if you live in an average cost of living area, then $5,000 a month is a really good place to start. And it gives you wiggle room for the months that maybe you overspend a little bit. But where that $5,000 a month comes from is from just living life. You're not having to travel to work anymore. You're not having to buy clothes for work anymore. You're not having to do all of those things, but there is still a cost associated to you being alive. What you see on your screen is a breakdown of the expenses that I expect my retirees to experience. The first thing that we have to take into account is the cost of the home that you live in. Even if you retire with your home paid off, you're still going to experience expenses related to owning that home. You're going to have to pay maintenance, taxes, insurances. You're still going to have those costs to live in the home that you own. Standard rule of thumb is that you designate 1% of the home's value for each of those expenses. If our couple has a $300,000 home, we're going to multiply that by 3%. That's going to give an annual cost of $9,000. If we divide that by 12, our monthly cost for living in the home is $750. In addition to that, you're going to have a vehicle or two. If we assume our couple has a vehicle for each person, there are going to be the same costs associated to owning that vehicle. What I like to budget for is $200 a month per vehicle. That's going to cover your fuel, it's going to cover your taxes, your insurance, and your maintenance. Yes, it could be a little high depending on the vehicle you drive or depending on how handy you are. Maybe you can change your own oil, you can do all of those things. But as a good baseline, we go with $200 a month per vehicle. Next, we have to pay for the things that make your home an enjoyable place to be. You have a cable bill, you have an electrical bill, you have a water bill, maybe some internet thrown in there. All of those things are going to cost you money. A good place to start is roughly $300 a month. Now, please keep in mind all of these expenses are individually based. It's based on you and your specific situation. But $300 a month, at least in the area that I live, is a good starting point. Next, you have to eat. You're not going to go out to eat all of the time because those costs add up. So for a standard family of two, we're going to assume $600 a month for their groceries. Next, we have our phone bill. The phone bill may be a little high, but I am a huge advocate for people using the major wireless carriers. The reason this is because it ensures you have priority to use their service. If you use one of the cheaper alternatives, you get to use the Verizon towers. But if the Verizon towers are busy with Verizon customers, then you get kicked off. As you get older, you need to have a reliable source of communication. So I would prefer that you spend money on the major ones. So if we assume two phones with good service, unlimited everything, just so they can stay connected, we're going to say $200 a month. Next, we have to worry about healthcare costs. I personally like for people to budget $500 a month per person for their healthcare expenses. The reason this is because each person is going to pay over $200 for their Part B premiums, and that's going to come right out of your Social Security check. But in addition to Medicare, you may want to have a Medicare supplement. If that's the case, that's going to cost you an additional $200+ each month for that supplement. So budgeting $500 per person per month is a really good baseline. Because our sample couple are married, that's where the $1,000 comes from. And then the last thing we want to budget for is money for them to enjoy their retirement. The last thing they want to do is work their whole life to retire and then sit at home and do nothing. We want them to make sure that they have additional money that they can enjoy. So we're going to budget in an additional $1,000 a month for them to go do whatever it is they want. Now, if we add all of that up, that takes us to $4,250. No, it doesn't hit that $5,000 number, but remember, the purpose of the $5,000 is to give us room to work with. So now that we've laid out all of the retirement expenses, now we want to know what that income gap is going to be. As we stated earlier, they're both going to receive $2,000 a month from Social Security. That's going to give them $4,000 a month of pretty much guaranteed income, and it's going to give them a shortfall of $250 a month. Now, to make up that difference, we would want to look towards their savings. But for $250 a month, it only requires $100,000. This is 1/10 of that $1 million that the media wants you to believe you need to have to retire. It is just not necessary. Yes, the more money you have, the better your retirement is going to be. It's also going to help you pay for things like long-term care if that time comes. But when it comes to actually pulling the trigger on your retirement, $100,000 will foot the bill. Now, if we wanted to have a little bit extra money to spend every month, or maybe you live in a higher cost of living area, maybe you need to have $300,000. We multiply that by the 4%, that gives you $1,000 a month of additional income. That also gets you to that $5,000 number we were talking about. But once you lay out your numbers and understand that it's all about cash flow, you would be surprised at how well you can retire on such a minimal amount of money. So that example is all well and good for someone who already has $100,000 saved or $300,000 saved. But what if you don't have anything saved for your retirement? Well, if that's the case, there's some adjustments that you need to make. If you are preparing for your retirement, meaning you're 5 to 10 years away, you should ideally be in the highest earning years of your career. What you need to do is you need to take full advantage of that to set yourself up for the retirement that you hope to have. The first thing you have to do is you need to reduce your expenses as much as you possibly can. You need to pay off all reasonable debt between now and the time you call it quits. And what I mean by reasonable are things like your car loans, your student loans, your credit cards, all of the things that are not your home. Anything you can get rid of reasonably by the time you retire, get rid of it. Not everyone's going to be able to pay off their home, and that's perfectly okay. There are things we can do to make that situation work. But all of that other debt and those monthly payments have to disappear. The second thing you have to do is you have to reevaluate the life you want to live in retirement. You may not be able to go travel the world like you had hoped. Instead, you might settle for the thousands of sightseeing opportunities that are within the US. The third thing you may have to do is you may have to skip on that Medicare supplement plan. We've already established that that's $200 a month per person, so maybe you have to go with a Medicare Advantage. Now, keep in mind, there's no advantage to a Medicare Advantage plan outside of the cheaper cost. But if you can't afford the supplement in retirement, then we need to scale back that expense. What I want you to keep in mind is that every $1,000 per month of expenses that you can eliminate before you retire is $300,000 less in savings that you have to have. Remember, using the 4% rule, 300,000 times 4% is $12,000 a year or $1,000 a month. You can either work to save that amount of money, or you could also work to reduce your expenses by that same amount. And then that ultimately reduces how much you have to have saved. I want you to understand that retirement is all about cash flow. Your savings does play a portion, but your cash flow is what's more important. Like I said at the very beginning, with proper planning, you can retire on Social Security alone. For some of you, that may be the case. You may have to work a little longer. That way you can delay your Social Security. But it can happen. We just have to work out the numbers. I am convinced that we are put on this earth to do more than work for 40 years, retire, then hope to live for 15 and 20, and that be it. There is more to life than just working. So as opposed to stressing out about your ability to retire just because you don't have $1 million, run your numbers and determine what it's actually going to take for you to get there. The purpose of doing that is for you to retire as soon as you possibly can. Time is the most valuable thing you have, and you can't buy back any more of it. So if you can put yourself in a position to retire sooner rather than later because you understand what you actually need, you could easily add 3, 5, maybe even 10 years to your retirement. That way you can enjoy the rest of your life. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. If this video or any of the other videos that I've put out has provided you value, then hit that subscribe button. If you know someone that's stressing about their own retirement because they don't have that $1 million saved, then send this video to them. That way they can understand that it's just not necessary. But I thank you all so much for tuning in. I'll talk to you soon.